Right. Good evening and welcome everyone to the second session of this year's Conference of Contemporary Research in Classics. Our first speaker for this evening is Víctor García Martínez. Víctor García Martínez is an MA student in their second and final year of the Ancient Religions MA program in the University of Wales, Trinity St. David. He previously completed a bachelor's degree in Science and Languages of Antiquity at the Autonomous University of Madrid, as well as a master's degree in History and Science of Antiquity in both the Autonomous University of Madrid and Complutense University of Madrid. His research focuses on the intersection between religiosity, literacy, and cultural memory throughout the ancient Mediterranean. After the completion of the Ancient Religions MA program, it is his intention to enroll in a PhD program. Victor's paper today is entitled The Cult of the Muses in Thespiai. And over to you, Victor.
Thank you. I am gonna share the screen. Can you see it?
Yep.
Yes, okay. How do you? Okay, this is. Okay, here's. First of all, thank you for the presentation and thanks to the Malta Classic Association for this opportunity. As has been said, I will talk about the cult of the Muses in Thespiai and the usage of the city of Thespiai in the construct of their identity based on this cult and on social memory as a whole. First, a bit of introduction. This is the territory of ancient Thespiai. As you can see, is bounded to the north by the Thespiai's plain, to the west by the Helicon range, to the south by the Corinthian Gulf, and the eastern border is a bit diffuse. It's difficult to surely attest. As you can see in yellow, you have the Valley of the Muses. It's situated directly west of Thespiai and directly southwest of Ascra, better known as the town where Hesiod hailed from, which is the closest inhabited place to the valley. The river Archontsitsa flows through the valley. In ancient times, it was known as the Permesos River. And the mountain that oversees the valley, the one where Hesiod said that the Muses, daughters of Zeus and Mnemosyne, inhabited. That mountain is called the Sagaras, and it stands at 1,526 meters above sea level. I'll now go for a chronological vision of the evolution of the cult, adding a bit of context before, and then going through the epigraphical and archaeological sources for each period. So first of all, we can attest that Thespiai was founded at some point between the end, the late Bronze Age at the 8th century BCE. And during the archaic time, it became it greatly expanded and gained enough importance so that at the onset of the Greco-Persian War, it sided alongside Plataea with the Greeks against the general stance of Boeotia. And in fact, 700 Thespians fought alongside the 300 Spartans in the Thermopylae, and only one of them survived. This catastrophe, this demographic catastrophe, made that at the end of the war, Thespiai had to accept new citizens from Corinth, Athens, and Sparta into their city. They also developed a close relationship with these three poleis because they wanted to separate themselves from Boeotia because of them having a different stance during the war. However, during the Peloponnesian War, all of Boeotia was allied with Sparta. Thespiai lost 100 men in Delium, for example. And after the war, after the king's peace, Thespiai became a very close ally of Sparta. It became the main center of operation in central Greece. And in fact, Sparta had a garrison in the city. It was due to this, the influence of Sparta, their closeness, and especially the wealth, that permitted the Thespians to um, develop the cult of the Muses that until now had remained rustic with no permanent structures or um, any structure at all. We know that it started to be officialized. There was some monumentalization during this time. It most likely the altar of the Muses dates to this time, and as well, it is quite probable that the musea were instaurated in a first stance at this time. The musea are were an agon of a music and singing competition um, celebrated in the Valley of the Muses that during the Hellenistic age was elevated to becoming Stephanitic and Pentateuch, and later on it became Pan-Hellenic. So it brought Thespiai and the Valley of the Muses a lot of attention, a lot of wealth, a lot of power. These would have been the first seeds of it in a much smaller scale, but this would have been the moment where the 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 valley would have some first musea. And nevertheless, in the end, Thebes defeated Sparta at Leuctra, and Thespiae became subordinate to Thebes until the year 335, where Thespiae aided in the destruction of Thebes by Alexander the Great, and subsequently held two of the seven tele or seats in the new Hellenistic Boeotian League that will would catapult Thespiae into being a powerhouse in Central Greece during all of the Hellenistic age. Um, the oldest inscriptions that we have in the Valley of the Muses date to around the year 600 BC, and they were all found in the peak of the Sagaras, which in Hesiod's time stood an altar to Zeus. There are no archaeological records of it, but it's quite probable that by the time these inscriptions were produced, that the altar was still functioning as such. And we also know, thanks to epigraphy, that around the 350 BCA, so where when Sparta had this alliance with Thespiae, that a cult group for Thamiris and another two Hermes were established in the valley. So we see that it was not only the Muses that were that had a cult in the valley, but other deities and heroes associated with them. Um, the oldest archaeological findings that we have are some early Helladic shards, and we have deposits from there on that prove that there was a continued inhabitation of the valley from there on. Pausanias, in his description of his visit to the Valley of the Muses, recounts a large amount of tripods being consecrated to the Muses. They are mostly Hellenistic, but he also talks that the first tripod, the oldest one, was the one that Hesiod himself consecrated to the Muses after his victory in Chalcis. Um, there's also a fragment of a 7th century Leves that, even though the veracity of the Hesiod history is a bit flaky in my opinion, it would point to this tradition of consecrating tripods in the Valley of the Muses from at least the 7th century onwards, which would preclude the later creation of the Musea. There have also been Pausanias also talks about some lead tablets at the Hippocrene, which was a spring halfway up the mountain in Sagaras, that had the works and days inscribed on them. So we can also see that way that Hesiod was always part of this landscape and was always present in the valley from a long time. As some coinage was minted after the king's peace by Thespiai. They minted three dice. All of them had a female head, and two of them also had a crescent, which indicated the female was Aphrodite Melanis. The third die, however, had no crescent, which could indicate that the head was of a muse or Mnemosyne. There are other theories, but those could be ones. Finally, in the sacred grove, there were was filled to the brim with statues of heroes, of deities, of course, of the muses. Most of the statues actually date to the 4th and early 3rd centuries BCE, and Pausanias describes a lot of them in a lot of detail. I'll just be commenting some, like there were two groups of the muses. There were also two Dionysus. There was an Orpheus, a Hesiod. There were, yeah. During the Hellenistic age, as we have said, due to the Musea, Thespiai became a powerhouse in Boeotia and in central Greece, and it was its prime. And during the Third Macedonian War, Thespiai chose to surrender to Rome, and thus was given the status of free city within Rome. It became a close ally of first the Republic, then the Empire. All throughout, it had a lot of imperial cult, and for example, Sulla was um, very involved in Thespiai. He was one of the biggest benefactors of the city, and the Thespians instituted the Erotidea in his honor on the year 26 AD. Sorry, 86 AD. The Erotidea were athletic competitions. So after this point, the valley hosted both musical and athletic competitions, which I think it's an example of how important it was. In the 4th century AD, we still have evidence of activity, but it's less intense. And we also know that Constantine used statues of the Muses to adorn Constantinople, and that they were lost in the Chrysostom riots in the year 404. Most of the epigraphs we have are dated to the Hellenistic and Roman ages, and Paul Huesch posthumously published in 2009 this corpus called L'Inscription des Thespies, usually shortened to IThesp, where he included 1,303 inscriptions, which are about half of all the inscriptions that have been found at Thespiai. For this project, I went over all of them and chose all that mentioned the Muses, which were a total of 80 epigraphs, and I categorized and studied each of them. I'm not going to go over all of them because this will take a long time, but just I wanted to detail the categories. The Musea Víctor lists are pretty self-explanatory. There were also two land leases that were made just before the games were elevated to Stephanitic. There are two land leases to the cult of the Muses. So it looks like the city of Thespiae was looking for a way to fund its musea. The dedications are comprise almost half of all the epigraphs, and they are very varied. There are some dedications from Hellenistic kings such as Phileteros I, Ptolemaeus IV, or Arsinoe III. Most of them are private dedications, and there's, of course, in the Roman era, there are some Roman figures that also made dedications to the Muses in the valley, like Augustus, Tiberius, or Marcus Agrippa. An administrative text that I would like to talk about are, well, two actually, are those who talk about the establishment of a synthetai of the Hesiod and of the Phileteraceae. A synthetai is a group of people that partake in a cult of one deity or a particular set of deities, in this case the Muses. And as the name suggests, the second one, the Phileteraceae, was established by Phileteros I of Pergamon. The most important degree is, of course, the one that elevated the games to being Stephanitic, and it is dated, according to Knoefler, to around the 210s. It is a bit contested, but right now I think it's the safest date. The base of the Muses is probably the most important sculptural group in the valley. It has the form of a pie, and it had all 9 Muses with their statues and some dedications. And it is worth noticing that during the Roman time, a statue of Julia, during the Augustan time, sorry, a statue of Julia was also placed among the Muses. And finally, there are some other epigraphs that didn't quite fit with the other categories, like one oracle that talked about having good luck if someone followed the precepts of Hesiod, and it was decorated, this oracle, by a cyclops emerging from Helicon, which is really interesting. The archaeological structures in the valley, except for the altar, all are Hellenistic, and all are dated to a few years after the elevation of the games to Stephanitic. It was the valley has always only been excavated by Paul Jamot between the years 1888 and 1890. And he excavated the altar in the center of the valley, the stoa with an Ionian colonnade, a theater, and then in 1954, who saw so that there could have been a second stoa on the other side of the river to close off the sacred space. And of course, in the sacred grove, more statues were added to during this time. The Hellenistic kings made a lot of gifts to this space, and also during the Roman times there was a lot of imperial cult here. I now want to talk a bit about intentional history and more like technical elements for the second part of the presentation. Gerke was the one who made who coined the term intentional history, and he said he defines it as history in a group's own understanding, especially insofar and it is significant to the makeup and identity of the group. Hall therefore says that social identity refers to the internalization within the individual of the knowledge that she or he belongs to a broader group, along with the value and significance that are attached to such affiliation. I also believe the value of the Muses is a theater, memory theater, as Alco coined this term, which means it's a locale where remembrance is inherent and it's made to remember. About this, Malmer says that locales can be created and serve as focal points for a group and its identity. A locale may be natural features or humanly created places and are constructed through the common experiences and symbols of the group. It is a place with which, through group activities, become an existential space. Apart from this, I also wanted to add that the makers of intentional history within a group are the elites, because they are the ones that have power, and the the intentional history is made through traditions. Traditions are the tools that the elites have to make or modify this intentional history. And also social identity. This sense of a common identity is usually started when the identity of a group is being threatened. Threats are the most common way of creating a common identity. I wanted to talk about the type of cult that can be attested in the valley, which is not much. We know that there was an altar, so sacrifices were most likely the most common forms of cult. And there's also notice of a temple to the Muses in Thespiai proper, which is quite unusual in the cult of the Muses. It has never been properly studied, and due to how it was excavated, it can never be studied. But we can presume that there would be a procession going from the temple to the valley at special occasions. It's true that we don't have much else to go of like concrete evidence that could point to more cultic activity. But I have to say that uh, most of the rituals attributed to the Muses, like dancing or singing or playing music, do not leave traces that we can then recover in archaeology. So the lack of evidence in this case does not preclude a lack of gold in the area. And I also wanted to mention Hesiod, which had a very strong presence in the valley, as we have said, as we have seen, but there is not strong evidence to suggest that there was an Heron anywhere in the valley to him, or that the Mnemosyne itself was also an Heron for Hesiod. He was vital in the construction of the Mnemosyne, though. Robinson says, and I quote, "The story of Hesiod's inspiration by Helicon provides the founding hierophany for the sanctuary." And to end, this picture is the base of the Muses that I have talked about before, and the shadow figure that you can see is the addition of Julia in Augustan times. We know that the valley was always a sacred space with a rustic cult at its core. But I believe that the presence of Hesiod and what he did and his writing changed the cult into a place of remembrance of him, of remembrance of his work, of remembrance of what he represents, as well as a sacred space, creating a memory theater. I also believe that Thespiai's identity was only threatened at the latter 5th century, early 4th century, when the demographic crisis happened and more groups came into the city, as well as the presence of Sparta, which must have been very oppressing at times. And that's why at that time elites elevated the Muses as the cultural marker and symbol of the city. Basically, Thespiai adapted itself throughout its history to survive, and the valley and the Muses were crucial for the construction and fortification and modification of their own intentional history. And to conclude, I wanted to end at the beginning, quoting the first verses of Hesiod's Theogony. saying, "Let us begin to sing from the Heliconian Muses who possess the great and holy mountains of heaven." That's it.
Thank you so much, Victor.